Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Yoga Sciences Podcast and YouTube channel. I have Rene Murata here today. She has an amazing story with what she's doing. She is a Reiki Master, and she also does compassionate leadership coaching. So I'm really excited to have her on today to share her story. Thank you for being on with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Pon.
We were trying to schedule this for like a couple of weeks already, and I'm glad that it's finally working out and we get to do this today. So let's begin with you've been doing Reiki for 8 years and been teaching for 5. So
Right.
let's get started with please share with us how you got into Reiki and the amazing story that you're able to help your brother.
Yeah. So I actually got into Reiki because of my son. So my son called me one day and he had this crazy story about this energy class that he had taken. And it was amazing. And Mom, you have to do it. And I thought, okay, whatever, And he says, no, really, you have to do it. And my father passed away many years ago, and my son made the audacious statement that he believed that had he known Reiki before my dad passed away, that he might possibly still be alive. So that caught my attention. So then I started looking for a Reiki master in the area that I was getting ready to move to. I was moving to Texas from California. And everybody from California is probably thinking, why on earth would you do that? And everyone from Texas is going, yay. But we made this switch. And so I wanted a Reiki community. And so I found a woman in Texas. I was doing some work down there. So I took Reiki 1, fell in love with it immediately. I mean, it was immediate. The energy flow, the colors, the things that I could see. And I was a self-help junkie before. I'll be really quite honest about it. I was one of those that read everything. The Secret came out. I read that. I listened to that. I watched that. And I don't know how many books, self-help junkie. But then I discovered Reiki. And that just kind of was what I did for a while. I went through the Reiki training. I could heal myself. I could work on other people. And while I legally can't say that I can heal someone else, I have seen miraculous things. And I'll share that in just a moment. But I went on to do Reiki 2. Then my husband went, and my other son, my younger son. So all of us were in Reiki training, and I was actually working on my master program by the time my brother-in-law, it was actually my brother-in-law, the story that you're talking about. He was in a motorcycle accident and he broke his back in 3 places. And he was like 3 millimeters from being completely paralyzed. I mean, he broke it so badly. And he broke it in September, the very end of September, and he came down to our place for Thanksgiving. And so he came down, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law all came for Thanksgiving. My daughter was there, my son was there. And so on the flight down, Matt sat next to somebody, and this woman, she looked at him because he had to wear this back brace, just this massive back brace, because it had to hold his back in a certain place on a position while he was on the plane. And she says, you look miserable. He says, yes. And so she drew some symbols on his leg, and he just went out, completely asleep. Like he was they landed the plane. He woke up. He came to our house. He says, you're never going to believe what just happened. She did Reiki symbols on him. And so then we did Reiki on him the entire time. My husband and I had a bit of a cough. So I didn't want him to get, if I had a cold, I didn't want him to get it. And so I would stand behind my husband and we would daisy chain or I would sit across the room and send Matt Reiki, and he got to the point where he was just like sweating bullets. And the 3 spots for the titanium pins, you could see 3 red spots like that on his back where the pins were from the heat. He says, you guys have to stop. The pins are burning up. Now, when he was in this accident, they had told him he would be out of work for at least 6 months. And then when he went back to work, it would be light duty for about 6 months. So he wouldn't be back to full duty for a year. His accident was the end of September. He was released to full duty December 4th. So, you know, we did Reiki on him all weekend long. The woman on the plane did Reiki on him, and he was back to work. The doctor said he had never seen anything like that in his entire life. So Reiki is, for me, been a very powerful tool, and it's not just healing, right? So for me, it began a journey, an inner work journey, where I really started to shift out of fear, out of, I lived in kind of a man's world. I still live in a man's world. I do a lot of work in the gas, oil, chemical. I'm a female business owner and in a male-dominated environment. That's my other life. And but I found myself softening and really kind of going into more energy kind of work. And so Reiki helped shift things internally. It helped me heal a lot of past trauma, a lot of old hurts. You know, I could say that I'm a Me Too survivor. I could say a lot of things, actually. And I feel like Reiki has been the tool that I have used to help start that shift into a place where I can now say I'm strong and healthy, and I feel good about myself. I feel, you know, I look in the mirror and I'm happy with who I see. I couldn't say that for many, many years, you know, and mother of 2 and grandmother of 4, 5, actually 5, if you count my step-granddaughter, which I do, you know. And so, you know, I mean, it's been a long journey. It's been a very long journey for me, for sure.
Thank you for sharing the journey. And so after your brother-in-law was healed, did he end up taking on the Reiki journey as well?
Well, Matthew had a really hard time believing what it was we did to him. Like he just really struggled with it. He very much the male patriarchal kind of, you know, like he didn't want his wife to work, and, you know, the man is the one who earns everything, and what kind of voodoo did you guys do on me, you know? He was happy to be back at work, but he had a really hard time with it. Now, my mother and father-in-law both did. So my mother-in-law had bursitis. We worked on her as well. And my father-in-law had a shoulder injury, so much so that they were getting ready to do some surgery. And so we did some on him as well. And he didn't need the surgery, and her bursitis healed. And so they both went back and got themselves Reiki trained. In fact, my father-in-law is a Reiki Master, and my mother-in-law, I think, is Reiki 2 qualified. So, you know, it was definitely impactful, and he was like, thank you. Now I don't want to know anymore. I was like, okay, that's all right.
That happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's his choice, and maybe someday he'll come to realization, maybe he just won't, maybe it's not meant for him to do this.
Right. Yeah, it's, you know, it's different for everybody, right? You know, and I've worked on other people in the past that they've been like, oh my gosh, this is fabulous, and I went and learned Reiki and then never did anything with it. You know, I've done that before, and other people are like, this is great, thank you for helping me, you know, and that's it. Just like, thank you. And I don't care, and it doesn't matter to me, but it is funny. It is funny to me.
That's interesting. Like you mentioned how you help get these people better, and you said you were seeing auras, like it's the process that you're learning. So what are some of the things that you are doing to help you to be more intuitive, be able to see these colors and be able to feel the energy? What are some of the prep work that you're doing?
Yeah, so Reiki is, when you go to a Reiki class, you get attuned to life force energy. And so the Reiki Master, my Reiki Master happens to be Melanie Harrell. And she comes, so the original is Dr. Yusui out of Japan. And then there's the lineage that I come from. There was a woman, she was a Japanese American from Hawaii, and she went to Japan, she learned it there, she brought it to the United States, and she, you know, there are 22 of her students here that they have formed the Reiki community. And then there are also other lineages that came out of Japan, you know, from some of Dr. Yusui's students. What happens is when you go to a class, you get attuned. And basically all it is somebody who has been through the Reiki course and has been through all of the training like myself. It's a hands-on where they just basically open up the portal to life force energy. And some people, you know, no matter what your dogmatic belief is, whether you're Christian, non-Christian, atheist, whatever, Buddhist, in my Reiki class that I took, there were 8 of us, I think. We had Buddhist, we had Baptist, we had Lutheran, we had an atheist, we had a non-church-going believer in a higher power. That would be me. You know, so we had a wide variety of people in the class. And so when Melanie goes through and did the attunement, just hands-on the head or on the shoulders or the hands, there's like a ceremony, if you will, that opens up the energy flow, and you become a conduit. So it's not my energy that I'm sending to somebody, because you know, that was one of my questions when I was first learning, is I didn't want to deplete my energy, but instead I become a conduit of life force energy to send energy to someone else. And so once you open that up, and you know, different people had different experiences in the course. I saw colors, and I also could taste metal in my mouth, which was really weird. There was another person in class, same thing. Some people heard voices. Some people just saw images, pictures of things. You know, I just saw like a plethora of colors, just these wild colors. So it really is a very independent kind of experience, what different people feel. Some people feel nothing. Some people my husband had tingling in his hands when he was trained. And his hands now, even now when I do Reiki on somebody, my hands get really hot, and people can feel heat when I'm doing Reiki on them. Other people have said that they feel cold. So the body pulls what it needs, you know, it's just energy. That's all it is. And what's interesting, Pan, is that I am a physicist by training. So that's my background, is physics. So for me, it was really easy for me to just go, okay, well, it's just energy. You know, it was a very easy thing for me in a scientific mind to say, it's just energy, and I'm directing it now in some way or fashion. So for me, it was really kind of an interesting way to explore energy, you know, as opposed to turning on a light switch or something. But, you know, it's the same kind of deal. It's like turning on a light switch. So.
That's very interesting, because all these people's different experiences. You could probably write a book with talking about the different ways of, like, you know, feeling energy and sensing things.
Yeah. It is interesting. Very. I had one person who I was doing Reiki on him, and he said he saw all these black swirling colors. At the same time, I was seeing he had vertigo. And I literally was like this. So I had my hands on his head, and my whole body was just like this. I was like, this is weird. I've never had this happen. This is wild. And then just like this light And for him, he had this light open up as well, and his vertigo was gone. Never came back.
Wow.
So
That's
it's
impressive.
pretty powerful. It's pretty fun.
Yeah. Since I started doing these interviews, at first I was only bringing on yoga teachers, and as they're sharing their stories, they start to talk about they also do Reiki. So in the yoga world, a lot of people take on Reiki in some form, fashion.
Massage too. So
Oh,
my
yeah.
son is a massage therapist, and he also does Reiki. And so anybody out there who's a massage therapist, let me tell you, the best massage in the world is somebody who has a Reiki training as well, because there's another level of knowing. And that's how my son, he says, I don't know how I know what I know. I just know, like, he'll work on me, or he'll work on anybody who's ever had work by my son will be like, oh my gosh, he just found this spot and he didn't press on it really hard. It just went away. You know, it's a different level of knowing.
My mom is an acupuncturist, but she's really good with her hands about feeling the energy, feeling where the problem is. And after the treatment, she knows if the person got better or not. And it's almost as if she's doing Reiki, but she doesn't even know that she is doing Reiki.
Yeah, well, you're using the same energy lines, you know. So acupuncture is I don't go to a normal Western doctor. Acupuncture for years. Same kind of deal, right? They're using that energy flow, that life force energy flow, the meridian lines, you know, and so it's the same kind of deal where you're tapping into a different level of knowing. It's very interesting. A lot of fun. I enjoy it.
Excuse me. So let's talk about, like, do you do some sort of like practice, like meditation or some sort of like energy work that you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, so Reiki for me, so I'm gonna step sideways a little bit. So Reiki became for me like the entry into other types of energy work. So once you're attuned with Reiki, you're just always attuned. And so there are different levels of Reiki that you can do. Reiki 1, where you just treat yourself and somebody else. Reiki 2, I can send it through time, space, and over distance. Then there's a Reiki 3, which is a more advanced level. And then there's a master level. Master level can teach other people how to do Reiki. I'm a Reiki master. So those are the different levels. Now for me, it became an opening into other types of energy work. And so I do also what they call etheric work. And so I work on other people in the etheric field, which is about 12 to 18 inches above the body. And so I can work in that field. I also am a light body worker, and so that's through Orinda Ben, and they're out of actually Ashland, Oregon, which is just a few minutes from where I lived for many, many years. Small world. And, so I do other types of work, and I meditate. I do meditate every day. And when I meditate every day, I meditate using the light body meditations usually, although I have also been working with some of the goddesses. And so, and for a long time, it took me a while to even start talking about this part of my life, because it sounds so weird from a science perspective. Like the Reiki was easy for me to explain, but the rest of it wasn't easy for me to explain, right? I went to Mary Magdalena's grotto, and I had this experience where I just really felt like there was a goddess, Mary Magdalena, standing right in front of me talking to me. And since that experience, when I meditate, a lot of times, like today actually, I had a couple of like images of goddesses that were speaking to me about the divine feminine. And so my work has really shifted into working with the divine feminine energy and feminine leadership and that sort of thing. And so as I meditate, I really now just ask, what is it you want to show me? And so I've allowed myself to be open to that. And it's been a very interesting journey for sure. For sure.
Very interesting. I've been hearing a lot of things related to goddesses lately. Goddesses groups, goddesses tribes, communities. These women gather together and they do like group stuff, dancing and rituals, and learn about the different goddesses. Really quite interesting.
Well, you know, it's on the rise, right? So we've lived in a patriarchal society for 2,500 plus years. And and when I say the patriarchal, it's a distorted energy. So I talk about the divine and distorted energy. So distorted energy is like, for example, a distorted masculine energy would be aggressive. A divine masculine energy would be assertive, right? And we all have divine and distorted masculine and feminine energies within us. We all have that. We make a choice every single day when we choose how we're going to respond or react to somebody. And so, you know, manipulative, most people would consider manipulative kind of a feminine type of trait, you know, a manipulative woman. I know manipulative men, right? So for me, it's a distorted energy. Now we can choose to reframe that and shift that around into discerning. And so somebody might be discerning. They're really thinking about and trying to understand and ask questions. And, you know, some people might see that as manipulative. For me, I choose to view it as somebody trying to get more information from me. And so as soon as I shift that, my response to that person is a very different kind of response, right? So the divine, so we lived in the last 2,500 plus years in that distorted energy, that aggressive, that negative kind of energy. And look at the world around us, right? We live in a very challenging times. So now the divine is coming back in. Women are pushing back, and women are pushing back because the divine feminine energy is a very accepting energy. That's where compassion comes from. Women who are in their divine, they're nurturing, they're loving, they're giving, but they're also very strong. They're very assertive, you know, like think of mother bear, right? A mother bear, you wouldn't want to mess with a mother bear, right? Very fierce warrior kind of energy that is also loving, giving, accepting. And a woman who is in her divine is also able to allow a man to be in his divine, you know. And so the woman coming in and that divine woman, feminine energy coming back in, yeah, it's coming back. There, I hear and see a lot more of that. I'm hearing more and more people talking about it. You know, I've watched some of your podcasts, you know, and seeing some of the different people, and you know, I have like a list of people that I want to reach out to and say, hey, be a part of this. You know, let's come together, more of us, and the more of us that start coming together, the faster we can start shifting things into that divine. And so, you know, I believe 100% in that. And like I said, it took me a while to start speaking openly about it, because it is, you know, I do work in a male-dominated industry. I work in gas, oil, chemical, petrochemical for my other life. You know, that's my other job, the other one. And so learning how to accept and stand up and say, you know what, no, I am part of the divine feminine, and I am speaking to it, and I am bringing forward, and I am gathering women around me. I have a group of women. You know, we don't do rituals and stuff because we're on Zoom, we're all over the world. But we have, I have a YouTube podcast, Compassionate Conversations. And so we've started gathering people together and having interviews. I have people coming in to do some interviews. We're talking about race and culture, and, you know, some of the LGBTQ community, and some of the different type, you know, bringing compassion into some of those tough conversations. And that's what the divine feminine is all about, is really facing that. We may not always agree with everything, but we can still accept people for who they are and allow them to be who they are. If we're really in our divine feminine, we can allow other people to be who they are.
So how do you make that shift for somebody who's still not open to this and like kind of wanting to explore more but not ready for it?
Well, so that's a really good question, actually. There are a couple different ways. First thing that I would suggest to people is that to start listening viscerally. And when I say listening viscerally, people have talked about body language and they've talked about the words that people use, but you can really feel the energy of a conversation if you think about it. So, like, for example, when you pick up a phone, right, and somebody calls you and you pick up a phone, you know immediately whether or not they're in a good mood or they're in a bad mood, right? So just by that, you don't even have to hear them say hello half the time. If it's a good friend, right? You don't even have to hear them say hello to know they're in a bad mood or they're in a great mood, because you can feel that energy. It's the same thing when you're sitting across from somebody at a coffee table, and you can really start to come from the heart space, really feel what's coming from the heart space to know whether or not somebody is being honest with you, to know whether or not somebody is being fully open with you. Maybe there's some fear that they have and they're afraid to say something to you. That's where vulnerability comes in. So really learning how to listen viscerally. And so what I tell people is start by thinking about first your best friend, right? If you think about your best friend, that energy is up in your heart space immediately. Immediately you're like, oh, my best friend right here, right? Then you think about that person that every time they call is, the gut clench, right? For me, whenever I'm in that fight, flight, freeze kind of energy, it's in my gut. Some people, it's the base of their spine. For me, it's my gut. And really kind of be very aware of those two energies, because one is reaction energy and one is open energy. So when I'm in my heart space, for me, sometimes I may have to make a difficult decision. I might have to say something I really don't like to say to help people wake up. But if it's the right thing to do or the right thing to say, it still lives in my heart space. So when we listen viscerally, we can start to respond versus react. So that's the first thing I would tell people. The second thing is I would start making a list. And I actually have one on my kitchen wall. The kids helped me build this. We did this chart where we did divine or distorted masculine, divine feminine, distorted feminine. And so they started listing all the distorted energies. The kids now are 10 and 12, okay? This is how old they were when I had them do this with my husband and I. So we started going through what are the distorted, the negative kind of masculine, feminine energies. We listed all of those out, and as many of them as we could think of. Then we listed all of the divine energies that we could think of, the positive energies. If people aren't ready to say divine and distorted, okay, say negative and positive, right? Use that language if it's more comfortable. And so depending on who I'm working with, I might use positive, negative. I might use wounded and warrior, and I might use distorted and divine. So I use the language that the person is comfortable with. But if somebody is wanting to start shifting, I'll say, okay, make positive and negative columns, right? And start listing those out. And then what happens is when you're reacting to somebody, you can ask yourself, gee, is that the energy that I really want to be in? Do I want to be seen as manipulative, or do I want to be seen as deciding, or do I want to be seen as aggressive versus assertive? And you can start to shift your language and shift your energy and shift your responses to people accordingly. So the kids, they use it. It's right behind my son. So he'll turn around and he'll go, yeah, she was kind of acting like this at school today, Mom. And so I chose to be over here in this one. So, it's very powerful.
Wow, it sounds really powerful. I want to see that chart if you could.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay, awesome. All right. And then I'll try to find a way to share it on probably a blog post. I don't know if I can post it on the podcast site directly, but so in terms of the whole trying to think, the whole feminine and the masculine energy, and you also mentioned how you can tie that into compassionate leadership. You were talking, how does that work with everything, with the whole leadership?
Well, good question. I started out with the divine and understanding the divine and distorted masculine, feminine energies. And so that really started into my leadership, because I own another business. So I really started playing with it in my own leadership and my own management style first. That's where it started. And really started to see shifts in how, not only between my employees and I, but my employees and each other, and my employees and my clients. And so I started seeing, like my marketing director and I, she's one of the women in the Compassionate Conversations. And she works with me in CEO Essence and with Risk. And she and I will have a client that might be a little bit more challenging, and we think, okay, so what are they going through? How can we help them? So, a lot of times in business, people react. It's this, it's so easy now to pick up a phone and, and respond and not ever think about the response versus a reaction. So today's society is LOL and LMAO and blah, 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 blah. There's no thought. So when you want to be in a compassionate leadership place, you need to, instead of saying you need to be in a compassionate place, it requires actively paying attention. It requires actively paying attention to your own energy, what you're projecting onto someone else, or to someone else. And, it also requires accepting other people. You may not always like what other people are doing or saying, but accept that they're human, they have their fallacies, they have their strengths, and figure out how to pull the strengths out of them, and really empower them. So compassion leads to empowerment. And when you can empower people around you, whether it's your employees, whether it's your clients, whether it's your friends, it doesn't matter. For me, when I choose, and it's an action, right? Choose to be compassionate, it leads to a whole different level of authenticity. People talk about being authentic all the time. Okay, compassion is an action word. It's not like, oh, I'm going to sit back and feel sorry for somebody. It requires being actively engaged with that person and really taking the time to get to know them. So when you have an employee that's struggling, and I have had this, you take the time to understand why first, and then take the time to, how can I help you? And if I can't help you, then how is the best way to shift things? Is it time to shift you out of this work and release you to go find a better place, or what? So being in a compassionate leadership position does require actively being engaged with your employees. It requires also a level of vulnerability, right? So when you're in your divine feminine, you can be vulnerable without like letting it all hang out, right? So you can let yourself be real with somebody. And as a business owner, I made some choices to allow my employees to see, allow my employees to see some of the hardships that we were facing when we went through a hard time. And by doing that, it brought them into the circle more. It made them feel more empowered. And so then we were able to move out of that. So compassionate leadership, there's a lot of different components to it, but those are some examples of some of the different things that compassionate leadership can really lead to. It really leads to a very powerful, strong, engaged workforce, and a powerful, strong, engaged relationship with clients. So your relationship with your clients becomes stronger as well, for sure.
So let's just say somebody's really not compassionate to begin with, and they're not connected, and they're not aware of it, and they're not that actively listening and paying attention and responding. So how do you approach that situation or deal with that person?
Well, so it began, that's a really good question, thank you. I was like, well, it really depends on the person, right? So it really does depend on the person, because first you have the person who really doesn't care. They really don't care. They don't want to, they're checking a box because their boss told them they had to take the compassionate leadership course, so it's check the box. And so there's really not much you can do with somebody like that. Then you've got somebody that they don't know what they don't know, right? They're not compassionate. They don't realize they're not compassionate. They're there because they've kind of got this weird, what is this thing? Those kind of people you can work with, you can really start to shift them forward. And I won't say, I shouldn't say that I can't work with the other type of person. I choose to not, because they're just not ready. They're not open to it. They're not ready. And I'll do a little bit to help kind of alleviate some of the challenges that they face at work, but until they're ready, it's just not going to happen. But the person who is ready and wants to see improvement just doesn't really know that they're not compassionate. Maybe because true story, I used to think I was a very compassionate person. I used to think that I was a very giving and generous and open and accepting kind of person. I didn't really realize how not I wasn't, right? So it wasn't until Mary Magdalena, till she got up in my face at the cave there, that I realized, whoa, I guess I could have been a little bit nicer to that person when I dealt with that situation. Or I guess I could have been a little bit more open about this situation. I guess I could have revealed a little bit more. So it wasn't until I had some of these events occur in my life that I had an eye-opening kind of situation where I was like, oh, that's what compassion is, right? So when somebody is curious about how to make improvements in the workforce, then they are open to learning more about compassionate leadership. Even if they're not a compassionate leadership, compassionate person, if they want better relationships, better communication in their team, they want their team to be more cohesive, they want more collaboration on their team, they want to bring out the creativity in their team, whatever the case may be, if they want more of something other than the bottom dollar, then that's a person who is open to expansion. And so, like I said, I would probably start that person with a positive negative conversation as opposed to divine distorted conversation, because I might freak them out. Honestly, so we'd start that way. And then it really is, like I said, you can learn to listen viscerally immediately just by thinking about the conversation that you're going to have when you pick up the phone, right? When your best friend calls you, and you know that before you've even spoken to them. So that immediately allows me to connect with somebody and help them understand how to listen viscerally. It starts shifting them into the positive, negative, divine, distorted, whatever they're ready for. and there are other activities that we can do to help bring that forward and help them understand what is compassionate leadership, for sure.
Those are some great ways to get them to be aware and then take actions. So what are some of the external factors that can contribute to their level of compassion? Like, for example, some external factors like just random, may not even be related, like finances or where they work or their home environment in terms of who they live with or like the community that they're with.
Okay. So external factors, I've seen people from every walk of life. So that have made a choice to lead and live compassionately. And so I don't think that external factors really play so much. I've seen people with money, without money. I've seen people that are in a very, from rural all the way to, big city, it doesn't really matter. So I don't think that external factors relate so much. What I do think, though, is that the way they were raised leads somebody naturally that way versus not. And whether or not they were raised to be a compassionate person or not, they have that innateness, right? So I know people that were raised in a family situation that never in a million years would you anticipate that they would be a compassionate person, because it was all about, I want money, 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 money in their family. But this person, all they care about was the animals, for example. And so that's a natural gateway into leading a compassionate life, is they care about something or someone more than them, right? And they care about the animals, they care about the plants, they care about the environment, they care about other people, whatever it might be, helping the poor. So that's a natural gateway into being a compassionate person, but it's not a requirement, a requirement per se to have that in order to shift into a more compassionate place.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So we went over a lot of topics and different things. Yeah. At the beginning, you mentioned you are into self-help stuff, like learning and doing all that stuff. So what are some of your recommendations for people that just want to explore some books or audio stuff or documentary type of things?
Well, so just so happens, I just was invited to participate in a book myself, and it's a whole bunch. There are 22 or 24, I can't remember, co-authors on this book that are all, for the self-help junkie like I am maybe. But there are mindset people, there are health people, there's a chiropractor, there's a sexologist, there's, I'm in there. So there's a wide variety of self-help type of folks that are writing a chapter in this book, and we're all offering tips and tools to help you in whatever aspect of your life. So it's a well-rounded book, unlike some of the others that I've read over time. I think the one that for me was probably the most, for sure, the most life-changing for me was Conscious Language by Robert Tennyson Stevens. And in it, he talks about how your word choices and the energy that you give to those words, the impact that it can have on your life. And so that was for sure a life-changing book for me. I've read it probably 3 or 4 times. I have it on my Kindle. I reference it all the time. The Secret, of course, was a very powerful one, but what is missing from that is that she talks about, giving gratitude, but it's the vibration of gratitude, to really feel that gratitude. And so that's missing from the book. And she actually talked later about how she had to take some of that out. Anything by Esther Abram Hicks. I love Abram Hicks, and I actually am just finishing up my certification to be a law of attraction coach through the Quantum Success Coaching Academy. So Christy Whitman, her books have been fantastic. I have the 7 Essential Laws. I just finished reading that one. She's she has several books out there. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. But I think for me, for sure, the conscious language was probably the one that stuck the most and made the biggest impact.
Thank you for sharing. That's one of the books I haven't read, so I'm gonna have to look it up and put it on my reading list for this year.
It's definitely, I'll tell you this, it's one of those books where you can't, it's not a sit down and read from front to back, right? It's not a story like a lot of other books. It's definitely one of those where you read it in chunks and then you kind of digest it and you put it down for a couple of months and you pick it back up and you read it again and you might reread a little bit and then on. It's definitely that type of book.
Yeah, there's a few of them that I'm currently reading, and I started reading. I'm like, oh, great! This is now one of the books that I can just start and then finish. I have to go back, so I'm kind of in the middle of like 2 or 3 books at the same time because I have to implement and take action based on what you read, and you can't just go through it, and otherwise you'll forget it and not be able to do the steps that they're telling you to do.
Yep. Well, yeah, I've definitely done that. I probably have on my Kindle. I think I have every Esther Abram book. On my Kindle. I have the Robert Tennyson, Wayne Dyer. I've read some of his, Louise L. Hayes. I mean, I've read all of them, right? So yeah, but I am really excited. So the book that it's going to be published March 3rd is when we're expecting it to be out. It's called One.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's called One.
So let me know when it's out, and then I'll update the link description.
I will definitely. It's like I said, there's 22 authors from all over the world. We have folks in Australia, we have folks in Europe, folks in the US. I'm in Italy. All over the world coming. And like I said, we're all different specialties of self-help, right? We all work in that genre in some way, shape, or form. And so yeah. Pretty exciting.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to the book.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really excited. I was like, yes, I'll be a one.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So tell us about your program that you're offering.
Okay, so I have a couple of different programs. One, I have a Reiki course that's about to come out, an online Reiki course where we're doing Reiki 1. And then we're doing 2 months of conscious language and some of the different processes that I've learned for the 7 Essential Laws, and then Reiki 2. And so that's a 4-month course. It's we're going to start it in March. And so I'm really excited about that one. My husband and he's a Reiki Master through another lineage. He didn't get it through mine. And I are going to co-teach that course. So that one's coming out March. The exact date I can tell you is whatever the first Thursday is. March 5th. So we have that course, and then my feminine leadership course will come out in April, and that's my next one, and that's a group course as well that I do online. And so when I do the courses, there's an hour of FaceTime via Zoom with a group, and then there's some reading to do offline as well, homework that is given to everybody. So like in Reiki, they'd learn all the positions and have to go do it. In the feminine leadership, I would give folks the assignment to really pay attention to different things and come back the following week. There's meditations for all of them. And that one's a 6-month course. The feminine leadership is a 6-month course. And then I also do packages of private coaching. So I do private coaching, and I'm also licensed to work with businesses. So I have a wide, a wide spectrum of things. So,
That's
but
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
the
important
Reiki
to
is
spread the
new.
word.
The Reiki course is new, and so anybody that wants to come through, like anybody that wants to sign up for any of the courses through your program, you know, through your podcast, if they would sign in and indicate that yoga sizes, then they'll get a 5% discount off the price of whatever package, whether it's a coaching package or whether it's one of the online programs. So whichever, you know, it doesn't even matter. I will honor it even when we start the feminine leadership course in April. I'll honor that.
Okay.
So
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to that as well. And I don't know if you have a link for that yet to basically pre-sign up. But if not, then I'll
yeah, I
share. I'll
do.
share a
Actually, I
link.
have for
Oh,
the
you do? Okay.
Reiki course, and I'll send that to you. The feminine
Okay.
leadership course, I won't have for another month, but when I do, I'll send that to you and just let your folks know that they have that. They still have that discount. I'll honor
Okay.
that. So
So I'll share what you have right now, and then I'll update it in
okay,
April. Then.
perfect.
All right.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a genuine pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.